77 WABC invites you to a family fun day and softball showdown on July 20th with net proceeds benefiting Shriners Children's. John Sterling will call the game as the FDNY takes on the NYPD with special guests Dwight Gooden, Art Shamsky, 77 WABC hosts including Sid Rosenberg, Anthony Cumia, Lionel, Dominic Carter, and many more. For more info and to buy tickets, go to ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org. That's ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org.
Hi, welcome to the Dick Morris and Doug DePiro show. We're going to start with talking about how the big, beautiful bill that has now passed will be the key to Trump's legacy.
But before, Dick, I would like to ask the people for as many prayers and as many people as could pray for these children that are missing in Texas with this flood. I think it's 27 little babies are missing, from 7 years old to, I think, 16 or 17.
God.
So it's just horrible. So please, prayers, put your prayers out there.
So go back to the balanced budget bill. Big, beautiful bill. Lux?
Mark Twain said there are two things nobody should see: a sausage being made or a law being passed. Trump's big, beautiful bill is an exception to the rule. It was passed in plain view, with the public following every obstacle, demand, and ultimately compromise and acquiescence. Of all the concerns of fiscal conservatives that it added too much to the national debt and our budget deficit were added and detailed and at length. The public debate was so comprehensive that it included a detailed examination of the Byrd rules and the power of the Senate parliamentarian, which is, you're going to talk about that later,
yeah.
The Senate parliamentarian. Moderates explain in detail their concerns that it cut Medicaid and food stamps too much. The SALT provision for tax deductibility for state and local taxes were the subject of extended debate and compromise. But far from causing the public to recoil in revulsion, as Mark Twain feared, the very process itself so turned people on and piqued their interest that it gave all of us an education on how bills are passed, and we followed the details of the debate with fascination and absorbing interest. We all watched the debate over Medicaid work requirements and mostly cheered when Trump succeeded in putting them front and center. And by the way, that has a lot to do with Dick Morris. I was with him, with the president, when he talked about that. And, actually, Vince Haley.
Yeah.
Right. And Dick had a lot to do with that whole work requirement thing with Medicaid. It's amazing. We'll talk about it later. We witnessed how the deficit hawks had to acquiesce in light of the massive new tariff revenues Trump raised and injected into the debate. We are in awe of the president's persistence, acumen, and flexibility in accommodating the various wings of his party and uniting them in support of the big, beautiful bill. We each laughed at Democrats' futile attempts to block, dilute, amend, or emasculate the bill in committee and on the floor. Watching them flail about ineffectually and with futility was itself worth the price of admission. That's true. Not since Lyndon Johnson thwarted the Southern conservatives and passed the massive Civil Rights Act in '65 have we been as impressed with the presidential power and persuasiveness. The massive scope of the BBB and the narrow one or two vote margin by which it passed have indelibly imprinted in our minds an appreciation of the skill and forbearance.
Yeah,
I got it. Forbearance of not only President Trump, but Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader John Thune. This was not like watching sauces being made, but more like watching the cooking channel on television with Giada De Laurentiis. That's what it was more like. She's beautiful. The resulting legacy ranks Trump with the with the legislative and tactical genius of all time. Trump accomplished all this while scoring a total victory in the judicial branch of government by stopping the left from using nationwide injunctions. This is important, too. injunctions by local district courts to frustrate his anti-woke policies and budget cuts. He held his ground in the face of daily harassment by small men and women and in oversized judicial robes to do the public will, and prevailed before the U.S. Supreme Court. Backed by only 3-vote margin in the Senate and only a few members in the House, he steered the BBB to safely and acceptance, ensuring his legacy for all time. See, I don't believe that he's thinking about his legacy. I think he believes he's got to do a great job for this country, and his legacy will follow. Thank you, God. This is Dick at the end of this. Thank you, God, for giving us this man and endowing him with such wisdom and skill. Yes, thank you, God.
Well, thank you. Thanks for reading that, Dad.
I had to read it. You know, Dick read it to me the other day, and I asked him with honor if I could read it because it was so brilliantly written. Thank you, Dick.
Well, thank you.
All right, with the thank you. Just go on with the show.
So there were really 5 key points that I worked on in the balanced budget bill. The first was at the start of the second term, I wrote a column and made the point, go big or go home. Mm-hmm. And there was initially discussion as to whether Trump should deal with some of this package now and some of it later, if he should try to pass everything at once. And people were cautioning him that a big bill would fail big time and that it would destroy his ability to be in his second term. I said that I felt that you needed to do it all at once. Mm-hmm. I said that the difficulty in doing a small bill is the same as doing a big bill, and might as well do everything at once.
While he has the juice.
Yeah.
With the Senate and the Congress.
And secondly, I argued hard and successfully for the small tax cuts like tips and overtime and Social Security benefits. I said that the way to counter the Democrats' claim that this was a tax cut for the rich was not by going into the intricate details of the tax tables and showing how much each income quintile benefited or not. Instead, do tax cuts that everyone knows are not available to billionaires, like tips. Other than stock tips, how many tips do you know a billionaire gets?
Right.
Thirdly, I said, precede the whole process by highly publicized DOJ cuts. People are saying, what was the point of Elon Musk going crazy agency by agency and scaring the hell out of everybody with these massive cuts and then triggering injunctions against him from doing it? The whole point was that Trump had to establish first, before he spoke about tax cuts or spending hikes, that he was the fiscal conservative, that he was the budget cutter, that he was the modern Ross Perot. And to do that, you needed to be able to parade a series of DOJ cuts that would be so painful and would cut so heavily into the federal bureaucracy that they would scream like hell. And that would vindicate and ratify Trump's status as a budget cutter as opposed to a big spender.
And not going after the little guy, and he's for the big rich guys right there also.
Right. And then the fourth thing, which was, I guess, the main thing, is that I said that you have to go after entitlements, and you obviously can't do Social Security, and you can't do Medicare, but you can go after Medicaid and food stamps. And the way to go after them is by insisting on work requirements. I related my experience from the Clinton years when we made everybody work for welfare benefits. And we found that very few people did, that they basically just dropped off of welfare because they didn't want to work. And they didn't think it was worth it. And I said, when you're dealing with a program like Medicaid, where you only go in when you really need it, when you're really sick, people aren't going to want to have a job 9 to 5, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year in order to assure that if they ever got sick, they would be covered by Medicaid. They're just not going to be willing to do that. So, but you can't say that. So what you need to do is to talk about work requirements for Medicaid.
That was brilliant.
Whereas, in fact, what you'll be doing is reducing the caseload. You'll probably lop 20 million people off of Medicaid.
Without throwing them out. They're leaving.
Voluntarily.
Ah.
But if you actually cut it, there would be all hell to pay.
Right. That was brilliant. I remember that meeting.
You just set up a situation where they would leave. And then, fourthly, use your tariff revenues, because he was doing his efforts on that, and get them scored so that you can fill the gaps in the budget, not with debt, but with tariff increased revenue. And you got to get that scored by the CBO, which they ultimately did,
right,
so that it would be counted in this.
And they backed off of that, all that bad scoring, and said, well, we did make a mistake, the CBO.
Yeah, we're sorry.
We're sorry about it.
But of course, the battle was not completely won, because everybody now thinks that this bill increased the deficit and increased the debt. And that thought has been burned into everyone's consciousness by the phony estimates of the Congressional Budget Office.
Right.
Now, over the next year or 2 years, we're going to delight in reports every single month that revenues have increased, the deficit has decreased, and then eventually that the debt has come down. But it'll take a long time for those reports to catch up with the initial fear injected by the Congressional Budget Office that these cuts were increasing the debt. It was despite that Trump was able to pass his bill. But the fact is that these accusations, these criticisms of the bill were and are totally phony. That when you look at the actual amount that will be spent after 20 million people jump off Medicaid, after all this revenue comes in from tariffs, this is not going to increase the debt. This will decrease the debt. And it's the first bill to actually cut the federal debt and federal spending. We lost that PR fight, but it'll be evident in the years or months and years to come, and on the show, that we succeeded, and bit after bit after bit, you're going to see how the debt is coming down.
You know, Dick, you said we lost that fight. I was just about to say, you know, we won it, but we did pretty good in talking about CBO and their, you know, having
we did
a bias.
The mainstream media never got it.
Got it.
CBO continues to reign, and everybody continues to think that this bill was good, but it added $3 trillion to the federal debt. In fact, when all the stats are in, we'll find that it probably cut the federal debt by several trillion.
All right. So when we come back, we're going to talk about more of this beautiful bill, right, Dick?
Yep.
All right, when we come back.
The Dick Morris Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dick Morris Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
President Trump achieved his legislative agenda for 2025 as the Senate passed 51-40, One Big Beautiful Bill Act on July 1st, in time for the president to sign it by July 4th. Lux, let's see what Fifth Dimension have to say about that. The legislation fulfills the signature promises Trump made on the campaign trail in 2024 that swept him back to the White House and enabled Republicans to secure House and Senate majorities. No income taxes on tips and overtime. Tax cuts for seniors collecting Social Security. Making the 2017 Trump tax cuts permanent. 100% expensing for factories to produce products in America. Finishing the border wall and boosting immigration and deportation enforcement. On Air Force One on July 1st, President Trump said in a press gaggle, the bill was ahead of schedule, and now with the wind at his back, the president's legislative agenda is enacted. It's about time.
Beautiful.
There are so few presidents who can actually say, I passed my agenda. And by putting it all in one bill and risking it, he really did a great, great thing.
We'll talk about what he did with Alaska and then, Hawaii, too.
Yeah, right.
This is good.
Yeah, one of his big problems he faced.
That's great.
One of his big problems he faced was
Alaska.
Susan Collins in Maine and Lisa Murkowski in Alaska. And they were both small states, but they were hollering about Medicaid cuts and the damage to their state. So he couldn't do this with Maine, but he could with Alaska. Trump said, okay, cut it out of the bill.
For Alaska.
And Steph said, what do you mean cut it out? there are 50 states. He said, just make them for 49 states. Just cut out Alaska. We don't need the money. Just cut it out. And
we can't do one state.
Then the Congressional Budget Office said, you can't do one state. Okay, so he said, all right, Hawaii too.
That's what he did.
And that's how that opposition went away.
He's a funny guy. And, I could see, knowing him and being around him so many times, I could see exactly how he said it. So listen, do the Alaska thing. Don't worry about it. Get rid of the thing in Alaska. Sir, we can't. All right, what? Hawaii. I can just see him say it. Just do it. I don't care how you do it. Just do it. He's a funny guy. It's unbelievable.
The final version of the legislation includes restrictions on Medicaid, the joint federal-state program that provides health care for more than 70 million low-income and disabled Americans. Medicaid was passed in 1965 and expanded in the 70s, and was originally a program designed for nursing homes, for the elderly in nursing homes. And it's 50% federal, 50% state, and it was a great program. And it was helping the elderly, and then they began to expand it to poor people as well, but very poor people underneath the poverty line. Then Barack Obama came along, and he promised universal health care coverage.
Yeah.
And he couldn't do it. Obamacare tried to cover everybody, but he couldn't do it. The premiums were outrageous, and the reason the premiums were so high is that every special interest in the world made damn sure they were included in the bill. Chiropractors, osteopaths, everybody they could think of, nutritionists, psychologists.
What's an osteopath?
A bone thing.
Oh, okay.
I mean, everybody was working on making sure that they were covered. And the result was that the premiums became so big that nobody could afford it.
Right.
And they were passed only with big tax incentives and subsidies, but the government couldn't afford that. So Medicaid, so Obama said, I can't leave with so many uninsured people. I've got to cover them while I'm president because that's my signature promise.
His legacy.
Yeah. So he told his staff, okay, dump it all in Medicaid. Cover everybody under Medicaid, and we'll just pay for it. And we'll claim that it was a big health insurance reform, and we'll get all the attention on my bill on Obamacare, but the fact of the matter is we'll do it through Medicaid. And that's how things stood after Obama left office. Then we were hit with COVID, and Biden's first response was sign everybody up under Medicaid, expand this program enormously. It had been covering 40 million people before Obama took it over, and then Obama blew it out to about 60 million. And then when Biden came in, he blew it out to 90 billion. He said cover everybody. So
Wait,
everybody
90
is
billion
covered.
or
90 million people.
Right.
So he said cover everything. And you get care to everybody and say it's in response to the COVID emergency. That with this plague sweeping America, everybody needed health insurance. And everybody more or less agreed to that. But then when COVID finished, nobody would roll it back. Nobody would cut it. Nobody would say, okay, well, now we don't need this anymore. So the 40 million people who originally were on Medicaid that ballooned to about 60 million when Obama left office went up to 90 billion under Biden. And nobody could cut it back because you don't cut entitlement spending and live to tell about it. So that's where we stood when the BBB started. And Trump's big accomplishment was in cutting back Medicaid. And the key to doing it was that the bill requires beneficiaries who are working or in school at least 80 hours a month. That says that if they're in school or working 80 hours a month, they can keep them health insurance in Medicaid. And the Senate version extends work requirements to the low-income parents of children over than 14 and also childless adults without disabilities and more frequent eligibility checks. So, but we had hoped, the administration had hoped, that we would be able to cut that back by increasing the state share of the Medicaid money, charging the states more and giving them less subsidy. But the Senate parliamentarian ruled that could not be included in a non-filibuster bill.
Explain the parliamentarian, the
Yeah.
Senate. Explain that.
Years ago, nothing passed the Senate because of the filibuster rule. And it took 60 votes to pass anything, and no administration ever got that. So there was never really a reduction in federal spending, and it was the key element in why the debt kept going up. Nobody could cut anything because nobody could pass anything. And the only thing that remained on the books were the entitlement programs that kept increasing and increasing and increasing as more people signed up. And you didn't need a legislative appropriation. It followed automatically. The more people showed up and said, I want to collect my Medicaid, Congress and the states had to write the check. But discretionary spending, cutting the amount allocated by Congress, was impossible because of the filibuster rule. So Senator Byrd from West Virginia, BYRD, authored the Byrd Amendment. And it said that for bills to cut the federal debt or balance the budget, to reconcile the differences between House and Senate versions on that, you can't filibuster it. It's filibuster proof. So that once you got a one-house bill passed, House or Senate, you could get the whole thing passed under reconciliation. And you could get the whole thing passed without 60 votes. You could do it just with a regular majority. So that was called the reconciliation process. And the process of going through the bill and taking out the things that were not eligible for it was called the Byrd bath. And the
Senate parliamentarian.
Senate parliamentarian. Now Elizabeth McDonough. Now she's just appointed by the Senate majority, and she serves at the pleasure or displeasure of John Thune. He can get rid of her anytime he wants, but nobody would, because they didn't want the bill to be seen as fiscally irresponsible and out of control, and they all willingly submitted to her discipline so that they could claim they were fiscal conservatives.
Right.
But the Senate parliamentarian said a measure cutting federal funds to states to use their own money to provide health care coverage and a provision banning Medicaid from covering gender transition services was not in compliance with the Senate rules. So the steep cuts to taxes levied by Medicaid expansion states on hospitals and other providers remained in the bill, despite objections from some Republicans in the Senate. The bill, so the some of the work requirements were gutted by the parliamentarian. The bill also requires people above the poverty level to pay out-of-pocket copays for most Medicaid services like lab tests or doctor's visits. The states will be allowed to charge up to 5% of a person's income per year, though some Democratic-led states may opt for a smaller amount. So these Medicaid cuts ultimately were very hard to do because the parliamentarian wouldn't allow a lot of them. So I said, okay, don't talk about cuts. Talk about work requirements. Just make them work and they'll drop out. They'll drop out voluntarily.
Yeah, that was brilliant.
And it's already started to happen. The Medicaid rolls are dropping by a couple of million every year. And I'll bet that when next year's stats are out, we'll lop off another 10 or 20 million people from it, maybe 30 or 40. And poor AOC, who's crying that the victims will be cut off from federal benefits.
They have to get a job. That's so horrible.
Yeah, isn't going to be... Well, it's worse than have to get a job. If they get a job, they can keep their Medicaid, but they'd rather not work.
Right, exactly.
And keep their Medicaid and not get their Medicaid.
Oh, poor Roy.
They would much rather not work. And I knew that, and I said that the key thing here was to insist on work requirements because that's how you would be able to finance this bill.
And when Dick brought up, I did something like this with Clinton, I always tell Dick before he talks to the president, don't ever mention Clinton to him. He doesn't care what you did in the Clinton White House. He just nods and said, okay, Dick, all right, okay, you did that with Clinton.
But I did with Vince and with the president about the work requirements. So one of the reasons that Trump was able to get this bill passed was terror. He had a reign of terror which is that he decided to pick one senator and crucify him, and that would discourage the others from doing it.
the Trump wrath.
Yeah. There's a novel, Candide, by Voltaire, and at one point, the hero of it shoots every 10th member of the army. He said, "Why'd you do that?" He said, "To encourage the others." And that was Trump's philosophy. So he picked out Tom Tillis, the senator from North Carolina, and he harassed him. He said he would fight a primary against him. He said he would oppose him. Dylan has a song about that.
Doesn't match that the strength of Trump. It should have been some, even though I don't like metal music, it should have been some metal song. Rah, 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 it ain't me.
So Tillis announced that he will not run for re-election in 2026. And he became the scalp on the wall. He became the moose head in the room that reminded you that this guy's got a gun and he can shoot you.
Forget the moose.
Yeah. Trump faced a brutal fight to get reelected anyway. But then Trump said he's going to run primary fights against Tillis because he voted against the bill. Tillis said it wasn't a hard choice. I will not be seeking re-election. He voted against starting the debate on the big, beautiful bill and told lawmakers he also opposed the final version over its cuts to Medicaid. In response, President Trump said he'd meet with Tillis's challengers and accused the North Carolinian of grandstanding. Between the lines, Senate Republicans are breathing a sigh of relief that they don't have to try to navigate a Tillis re-election. His numbers with moderates and the Republican base were creating major concerns for the party's ability to turn out a midterm coalition. But the main impact of getting rid of Tillis was an example. In 2017, he faced the same problem with his earlier tax cuts, and he got the senator from Tennessee not to run for re-election, and one of the senator he cowed and literally terrified them into line. And those two portraits didn't sit in the Senate gallery, but they were engraved into the minds of every member that this is the fate that awaits you if you try to screw with Trump.
So what you say, was it that simple that he just met with Tillis's challengers?
He said he would, and he said he'd back them in a primary.
And it was that simple that Tillis said, "Okay, I'm out."
Yeah, that's
You're
right.
out, Tom.
Well, it was a marginal seat. He knew he wouldn't win it. And why would he go through putting up with Donald Trump on his butt when he couldn't win?
Wow, that's
so
beautiful.
He said, "I'd rather be with my family." So he dropped out. And that act of terrorism, that act of scaring the hell out of the incumbents, was key to bringing everybody else in line. Because the implicit notion was, there you'll go the way of Tillis unless you toe the line here.
Well, that's what he does with everyone and everything. He doesn't bluff. This is what I'm going to do, and that's it. And people listen to him.
Now, when we come back, we're going to talk about the other huge victory that Trump scored this week, which is the Supreme Court decision banning nationwide injunctions.
The Dick Morris Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dick Morris Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The decision by the Supreme Court taking away from district courts the power to issue nationwide injunctions is huge. It's one of the most important decisions the court has ever made. It means that you cannot have one district court judge, or even a few of them, make a decision that applies to the whole country, that they can only make it apply to their own districts or eventually to their own states. Mm-hmm. And even that they can't do without the Supreme Court. And it's a gigantic, major change.
Great win.
Yeah, let's hear what Survivor has to say about that.
He really is coming out clean with so many things.
In this case, there were actually, it turns out, Bondi said, 5 judges. That's all it was. Out of 600 judges, district court judges in the country, there were 5 men and women who decided that they were elected president. Mm. And the liberals knew who they were. And as soon as Trump made a cut They were in front of those judges demanding an injunction and demanding that the injunction covered the entire country. So let's now go through the stuff Trump will now be able to do that the federal court stopped him from doing under this old rule. In February, a federal judge in San Francisco blocked the implementation of executive order targeting federal funding for sanctuary cities, a term for cities that flout federal immigration law and refuse to assist federal agents in enforcing it. The judges at the time said this push violated the 10th Amendment by imposing coercive conditions intended to commandeer local officials into enforcing federal immigration practices and law. After Trump signed the order, Bondi issued a directive for implementing the funding cut. She said, to protect the American people from the effects of unlawful mass migration, President Trump has prioritized securing our border and blah, blah, blah. And furtherance of this objective, the DOJ will ensure, consistent with the law, that sanctuary jurisdictions do not receive access to federal funds from the department. So she threatened to cut, so she said, we'll cut off funding to you if we continue to be sanctuary jurisdictions.
Sure.
So they went into court and they got an injunction stopping Bondi from doing that. Now that injunction is off, and these sanctuary cities are going to face the music. They're either going to have to lose their federal funding or discontinue their sanctuary city policy. Trump also will now be able to push ahead with a stalled effort to overhaul U.S. election law through an executive order that will require states to impose stronger voter ID and proof of citizenship requirements. Your whole thing, Doug, that you've been working on. The United States has not adequately enforced federal election requirements, for example, that prohibit states from counting ballots received after Election Day or prohibit non-citizens from registering to vote, the order said. It was halted by federal judges in Massachusetts and Washington after 19 states sued. So we're going to be able to stop sanctuary cities from happening, and we're going to be able to enforce everybody to go through the process of being registered and being a citizen with proof of citizenship. Another policy that could be affected was an effort by Trump to freeze upward of $3 trillion in funding and grants to states where they were reviewed for alignment with the administration's goals and priorities. 23 states sued to block the policy. They were granted favorable rulings, which the government has appealed. The attempted funding freeze comes as part of Trump's larger effort to reduce federal spending and ensure that public spending aligns with the goals of his administration. But all $3 trillion of funding freeze was vitiated by two little district court judges who decided that they were the president, not Trump.
It's unbelievable.
And now their power is taken away from them, and this funding freeze and these cuts will go ahead. And that's a key element in how the balanced budget bill passed, because now these funding cuts are going to happen. Another policy that could be permitted to move ahead centers around on diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, programs in public schools.
That DEI really stands for didn't earn it.
Okay.
That's from Charlie Kirk. I hear him say that all the time. Didn't earn it.
The administration, through the Department of Education, has ordered public schools to end such programs or risk losing their share of about $75 billion in federal school funding. But judges in 3 jurisdictions, New Hampshire, Maryland, and Washington, blocked the effort. No more. Now those cuts are going to happen. Taxpayer-funded transgender funding. Another policy that could be back in play is an effort by Trump to block federal funding for medical providers who performs transgender-related procedures on children. In a January 28th executive order, Trump said that the U.S. will not fund, sponsor, promote, assist, or support the so-called transition of a child from one sex to another, defining child as anybody under 18.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now that's what I believe is important.
But then a left-wing federal judge from Baltimore enjoined it, and the policy hasn't been able to be enforced since March. Now it's back, and now it's going to happen.
Bye-bye. See you, bye-bye.
Finally, the USAID funding. Finally, the Supreme Court decision could permit Trump to move ahead with his administration's efforts to effectively end the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, and wrap the agency into the State Department. One after another, Musk has come out with stories of the crazy grants that they made, like to deal with sex change operations in Nepal, or to or do all kinds of stuff internationally and nationally that was ludicrous. But a Washington judge ordered Trump to resume the payments, and now he doesn't have to anymore. So these are concrete, real changes that are going to happen as a result of this magnificent Supreme Court ruling. Now, the court voted 6-3 for this ruling. So everybody who has cursed John Roberts or said that he was a sellout and he's not really a conservative, and wondered if Amy Coney Barrett was really a good choice, or were Kavanaugh or Gorsuch towing the line, undo your concerns. Those three judges stood up with the other six, those three up with the other three, and they voted 6-3 to go ahead with eliminating this ability to have nationwide injunctions.
I think the most important one here is the kids 18 years or younger, that you can't just go, teachers take them to a clinic and have them things cut off.
You put Jack on the school bus and Jill comes home.
That was horrible, and that's great. I'm glad they ruled in that favor.
So this was tremendous, tremendous progress by Trump. Now, when we come back, the scene will shift, and we'll go to New York City, and we'll talk about that.
Well, you got 4 more minutes if you want to talk about it a little bit.
No, I don't.
Yes, you do. It's 49 we're out. And
Sorry,
it's 46.
Okay, yeah. All right, Mamdani. Let's remember that Mamdani only won this primary because of Andrew Cuomo. And if Andrew Cuomo were not the kind of governor he was, who first was a creep in sexual matters, but secondly, and much more importantly, he moved 6,000 people from nursing homes, from hospitals into nursing homes, people that were contagious, who had COVID, and he put them in nursing homes because it was the only place he could control. But those are places where the most vulnerable people lived. So they had no resistance to COVID, and they got it, and they got sick of it, and 6,000 of them died. It was the greatest mass execution by federal policy since Andrew Jackson's Trail of Tears in 1820s, when he took smallpox viruses and put them into the luggage of Indians as they were trying to come to the West and killed them all.
Mamdani.
So this was basically Cuomo waging chemical warfare against his own people.
Oh my God, you're right.
And that's the reason that Mamdani won. It's not that they embraced his socialist agenda, or that they loved free bus fares, or that they loved rent increases. They loved all that, but they were mainly focused because of Cuomo. And when Cuomo announced he was going to run again, despite having lost the primary, it set this race in an entirely new focus. But in stopping Mamdani, we need to follow good campaign strategy, because if we just sputter in outrage at what he's done, what he's proposing, it's not going to work. What we've got to do first is raise Mamdani's negatives. We have to have people understand the impact of what he said and the impact of what he will do, so that we understand that free bus service means lousy bus service. It means you never see a bus. You wait for hours. No rent increases for housing. Stabilized housing means you don't get heat. You don't get services.
You're not going to have landlords.
And eventually you're not going to even have a building because there won't be housing. And all of his proposals are based on the idea of limitless supply, based on the idea that the money will always be there, but it won't.
Government grocery store?
Yeah, government grocery stores means you wait for a couple of hours for a quart of milk.
If they have it on the shelf.
Yeah, if they happen to have it. So we need to focus on those negatives first. We need to have everybody understand what Mamdani will do. and then later focus on who we should vote for instead.
Curtis. This is why Curtis has a shot. This
Yeah.
is the reason he has a shot at
He
this.
has a shot because of this, but that's later.
Right.
That's for a month from now, 2
Right.
months from now. Right now, whether you're for Adams or for Cuomo or for Curtis, you got to be focused on stopping Mamdani.
Right.
And that's the immediate focus. And people can generally focus on only one thing at a time. And the thing to focus on now is stopping Mamdani.
Mamdani's negatives.
That's right. So when we get back, Doug will tell you about Bondi firing 3 J6 prosecutors.
Like bonfire.
The Dick Morris Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dick Morris Show
Entertaining and informative.
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Intro me in. What is this
Welcome
show?
to the Dick Morris and Doug DePiro Show.
So I'm calling this the Bondi fires. The
Yeah.
bonfires. Bondi fires 3 J6 prosecutors.
Those are folks who prosecuted people for the January 6th riots at the Capitol. And
So they got to get
prosecutors-
out. They got to get out.
Yeah, let's hear JoJo on the subject.
So the Trump administration has removed at least 3 career federal prosecutors who were involved in the prosecution of the individuals charged in connection with the January 6th Capitol breach. The action was taken on Friday by Pam Bondi, who issued dismissal letters formally ending their employment. I love that. Bondi told these prosecutors they were removed from federal service. Bye-bye. Say bye-bye. Get out. Bye-bye.
You know, we should put another one bites the dust.
Yeah, right. That would be
Okay,
it.
bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. That would be good. Another one bites the dust. She's great. Also, the searchable list of U.S. citizens. Trump administration has built a searchable national citizenship data system. The tool is designed to be used by state and local election officials to ensure only citizens are voting. But it was also developed rapidly with the public process, and some of those officials already worrying about what else it could be used for. Too bad. So that's what he's doing.
Let's hear it from police saying don't vote if you're not a
If
citizen.
you're illegal and you vote, we're watching
and
you.
you had people all over the place doing it.
Yeah.
You won't have to do that anymore.
Right.
Because in the conversation we had with, I forgot her name, the attorney for these suits, she said the problem is there is no national base of citizens. There's
Cletus?
Cleta Mitchell,
Mitchell,
yeah.
yep, mhm.
There's no way we can search and determine who's a U.S. citizen and who's not.
So I came up with the idea. We put signs everywhere in all the not sanctuary areas, the
Polling places.
polling places, right, and it's with vans, with the digital sign that says if you're illegal and you're going to get caught, you're going to get deported. We different signs all over the place. So if you were illegal and the Democrats say, listen, we're going to give you $50 and beer and lunch, and we'll bus you to the polling station. Please vote Democrat. And you see these signs. Are you going to go out and have a beer? Stay home with your friends and watch soccer. And it worked.
But now Trump has set up a national database, searchable, which tells you instantly if somebody's a citizen or not.
He signed a moratorium, imposed a hardline U.S.
Yeah, before we get to that,
Uh-huh.
just savor your triumph on that. This was your issue.
Yeah.
The idea of voting, of non-citizens voting. And Trump has now solved this problem by setting up a database that is searchable, which means individual clerks and counties and election officials can just tap into their computer, tap a name there, and it'll come back and say non-citizen, non-citizen, non-citizen.
Right, good.
And the person won't be able to vote.
You know
This
how
is the Doug DePiro clause.
Thank you, Dick. You know how I came up with that? We were talking with General Flynn, me, you, and a couple of others, and this is a year earlier before the election, and I remember saying we have to get as crazy as they are. The Democrats just go at it with us in so many ways, And that's what I came up with. That's just, a little bit what you want.
Go to Sandra in New Jersey.
Hi, Sandra.
Hi, Sandra.
Uh-oh, she's playing piano. Sandra?
Uh-oh, is that for us?
I don't know.
You're on.
I'm going to ask him.
You're on, Sandra.
Well, Sandra raised a question about Elon Musk's Independence Party. Musk announced on X, Twitter.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, that he would form a third political party that he was calling the American Party. And he condemned both the Democrats and Republicans for their pork barrel spending policies. So Sandra, I'm sure, was calling to ask what I think about that.
What do you think about that?
Well, the answer is that as long as Trump passed this bill and did this bill and cut the spending, and the spending cuts will stay, and the Supreme Court has insisted that they stay, Musk's thunder is gone. All the cuts he wants are happening. And the idea of an American party, a third party, made sense when the Republican Party wasn't doing it, but Trump has done it.
So, Sandra, are you on again? Are you back on?
I'm here. Do you hear me?
Now we hear you.
Hello?
We just answered your
good.
question, we think. But go on. What do you want to say?
Okay, I'm in Chinatown, so I don't have the quiet time that I usually have when I call in. But I wanted to say two things. One, I was thinking about Tim Homan. I feel so bad for this man. He is working so hard to do what we elected him to do, and he has to be separated from his family. He can't stay with them because they're getting death threats.
That's horrible.
I wanted to say that Mayorkas, the czar before Tim, we never treated him like that.
No.
We were frustrated for 4 years, but we went along with the program. And for the other side to treat Tim Homan like this, to me, it's an outrage.
They're animals. They're animals, Sandra.
That's horrible.
These people.
What else you got, Sandra?
What else you got? You playing some piano?
Well, I'm in Chinatown now. I'm thinking about dim sum, and my daughter's getting pissed off that I'm on the radio.
Oh,
so
Dick Morris loves his Chinese food.
You know why it's colder in Chinatown than any place else?
I don't know why.
Dim sum.
Oh, really?
Dim sum.
It's so crowded here. I can't believe it.
You should
my
hear,
God.
Sandra, you should hear the arguments. I'm Italian, right? And we got the best Italian restaurants from Yonkers North. It's unbelievable. And Dick always went, I want Chinese food. You know, the Jews, they always have Chinese food, right? I want Chinese food. I go, no, let's get Italian. You should see.
Oh, God.
Thank
guys
you,
are so funny.
Sandra.
I
I love
you.
you.
Both. Have a great holiday. Happy
Great.
4th.
Thank
All
you.
right?
Bye. Bye.
Very happy 4th. God,
Yes.
what a 4th.
Oh, so great.
What a 4th.
Oh.
Now, when we come back, Doug's going to talk about Trump imposing harsher sanctions on Cuba. We'll get to that.
The Dick Morris Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dick Morris Show.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
So Trump imposes harsh sanctions on Cuba.
Lux?
Aruba, Jamaica, ooh, I wanna take you. Bermuda, Bahama, come on, pretty mama. Key Largo, Montego, baby, why don't we go? Jamaica, off the Florida Keys.
I used to sing that song to my babies when they were babies. President Trump on Monday signed a memorandum imposing a hardline U.S. policy toward communist Cuba and reversing measures put in place by Joe Biden. The White House said this. The directive will enforce a statutory ban on U.S. tourism to Cuba while supporting an economic embargo of the country. Reuters Tariff Watch newsletter is your daily. Now I don't read that. While Americans cannot visit Cuba for leisure, travel has been allowed for activities including educational or humanitarian trips.
Which is such BS.
Which is that's the loophole.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm a humanitarian. I'm going to give a peach to someone. As one of the first acts after taking office in January, Trump, a harsh Cuba critic revoked the Biden administration's last-minute decision to remove the country from the U.S. list of state-sponsored terrorism. He also partially restricted the entry of people from Cuba. Under Monday's thing, Trump renewed a ban on direct or indirect financial transactions with entities controlled by the Cuban military, such as Grupo de Administrazione Especiale.
Biden had revoked a 2017 Trump order that restricted financial transactions from some military governments and Cuban-linked entities. The new memorandum enforces the statutory ban on U.S. tourism to Cuba and ensures compliance through regular audits and mandatory record keeping. What I think Trump needs to do is to ban cruise ships from docking in Havana or in Cuba.
There's money.
A big source of the Cuban revenue comes from tourists on U.S. cruise ships.
Interesting.
And it's one thing to stop tourists, but it's another thing to stop cruisers.
Thousands.
Yeah. And he could do that with the stroke of a pen, and he's got to do that. It's very important. Now,
who's running Cuba now? His brother, nephew? Who's the Castro?
I don't know the name of the guy.
Yeah, he's a Castro, though,
no,
isn't
it's
he?
Castro's people.
Yeah.
Yeah. More Democrats are pushing for primary fights against incumbents. This is a movement happening within the Democratic Party, and it is wonderful. It's led by a guy named David Hogg, H-O-G-G, who was elected to the Democratic National Committee. And he's... What?
Diaz is the name of the... Yeah, Miguel Diaz. I'm getting in my ear.
Okay.
The Cuban guy.
Okay.
That's running Cuba.
Oh,
Miguel
right, Cuba.
Diaz.
Yeah, okay.
Uh-huh.
But I'm talking about something close to Cuba, the Democratic National Committee. They've recently had this big fight, knockdown, drag-out fight, where David Hogg ran for a seat on the Democratic National Committee. And he said that we needed to have primary fights against incumbent Democratic congressmen and senators. And that's indicative of the same kind of conflict that led to Mamdani's election. What David Hogg wants to do is make it make probable that there will not be constantly long-time serving Democrats in Congress. For example, he's running to unseat Brad Sherman, a septuagenarian who served 15 terms in the House.
See, right there, hold on. Septuagenarian. Who the hell listening to this show knows what that means? You know what it means? Ages of 70 to 79.
Some of us are septuagenarians.
Ages 70 to 79 is septuagenarian. Who knows what that word? I had to look it up.
In a few years, you'll know.
And then phonetically write it out so I could say it again. All right, go on, Dick Moore. With your big
Hogg
words.
and other progressives are positioning Mamdani's victory as a blueprint for advancing a new future for Democrats as the party continues to reckon with its precipitous slides in the 24 election, particularly among young voters. Hogg's group, called Leaders We Deserve, is one of several organizations that have risen up in the past several cycles, dedicated to electing more progressives. Something that's important to be doing it outside the party infrastructure, said Amanda Littman, founder of a group called Run for Something, another progressive group.
Run for Something, that's pretty good.
This is the trend that I've talked about since Election Day, which is the Democratic Party will inexorably and inevitably move to the left. That's how Democrats always react to losing elections.
You've been talking about this.
After Mondale lost and Dukakis lost, the next candidates were after Carter lost.
Yeah, after Carter.
Mondale and Dukakis were the candidates.
Right.
And after Humphrey lost, McGovern was the candidate. Democrats always move to the left after they lose elections.
Which doesn't make a lot of common sense. It really doesn't make sense.
They can't help themselves. They don't want to, but they have to, because their own constituency in primary fights forces them to move to the left. And what you're seeing today by this guy, David Hogg, is that he's going ahead and challenging incumbents in primary fights, Democratic incumbents. And these guys are going to get up there and they're going to say, oh, unity in the party, stand together, beat Trump. And Hogan's going to say, we want you out of there. We want younger, more aggressive supporters like AOC to take over. And inevitably, we're going to watch over the next 3 years the erosion and collapse of the Democratic Party, because it will be replaced by crazies who will take over the party.
And you don't think somebody strong is going to come out and say, we can't do this?
They can't, because they'll lose the primary.
Right. That's amazing.
They can't. And one after another, you're going to see these long-term Democrats lose elections in primaries to crazies in their own party.
You think a couple of cycles, at least two cycles, maybe
I think
three?
by 2018, 2028, there's going to be a whole new Democratic Party, because all the old guys will have been cleaned out.
But a new party, meaning real super progressives?
Crazy left-wing party.
Really?
Yeah.
Not even getting close to the center.
Right.
Going further away. Wow. So, Russia lost 1 million men in Ukraine. Not dead, just whether they were injured or incapacitated with this whole this war thing. I mean, they're blowing in the wind. It's not always death. Apparently, Russia lost almost 1 million soldiers so far, but not all, not all dead. Approximately 100,000 died. More deaths are possible, but not verified. The rest got injured in a way, they're incapacitated and injured in a certain way that they can't return to the battlefield. And it also includes desertions and capped desertions. I'd like to know how many are deserted, right? On top of that, those aren't all Russian regular military soldiers. It includes many mercenaries in North Korea also, North Koreans. And given that Putin needed to increase recruitment every single year since the war started, and he's had to hire tens of thousands of mercenaries, and he needed to get North Korea involved as well.
That should tell you how well the war is going.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So how about DeSantis signs this new bill blocking the state funding to censorship? This is great also. The censorship complex was dealt a severe blow this week as Florida moved as the first state to ban public funds for advertising agencies targeting conservatives and independent media. The new law signed by DeSantis bans the spending of any state money with any advertising agency that uses so-called media monitors, fact checkers. You believe those people? This law prevents any ad agency that gets state funds from using groups like NewsGuard, GDI, Ad Fontaine. I don't know how do you say that?
Ad Fonts.
Yeah, like the type. Other groups. It's a major blow to left-wing groups who have sought to censor and defund conservative and independent media. Good for them.
Yep.
Son of a B.
That's right. Well, better late than never. One of the leading critics of Trump's tariffs, Torsten Slok, the Apollo Global Management chief economist, who had warned that the president's tariffs would trigger a recession by the summer and inflation right away, said trade partners will be happy with only 10% tariffs and U.S. tax revenue will go up. And then he said, and I quote him now, maybe Trump has outsmarted all of us. Good.
Love it.
There was some comments by Rufus DeSole about that. Customs revenues, tariff revenues, exceeded $100 billion since Trump returned to Washington.
$100 billion.
Yep, and that wasn't in the budget. That's new money. Of that figure, the vast majority is from tariffs. The president's trade strategy begins to pay off in a big way for the federal government. According to ICE documents since January 20th, the total customs revenues generated from actions such as tariffs, taxes, and fees has climbed to $106 billion as of Friday, $85 billion from tariffs. For the current fiscal year, tariff collections are up 65%. If current levels continue unabated, annual customs revenues are reportedly expected to beat Trump projections. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, and trade advisor Peter Navarro had previously analyzed that Trump's tariffs would bring in $300 billion in new revenue.
Wow.
But in a recent analysis, Apollo Global Management chief economist Torsten Slok admitted that the president's tariffs, which he warned would trigger a recession by the summer, may have been more strategic than he originally
So
believed.
Torsen was a slock.
He said, quote, "This extending the reciprocal tariff deadline would seem like a victory for the world, and yet would produce $400 million of annual revenues for U.S.
400
taxpayers."
billion.
400 billion,
Would it
right.
be?
Maybe Trump has outsmarted all of us.
I love that.
You bet your
But
booty
you're
he's done.
bippy. You bet you're bippy.
bet your bippy.
That's
yeah.
from laughing. Bet you're bippy.
And tariff revenues basically have been what has offset the entire deficit in the balanced budget bill. That's more than the U.S. ever collected for a full year. At current levels, annual collections are ahead of the administration's estimate. The tariff increases announced through May 13th would reduce the cumulative budget deficit by $3 trillion, the CBO said, or $2.8 trillion after adjusting for the hit they caused to growth and investment. The $3 trillion additional revenue more than wipes out the claim by CBO that one big beautiful bill will add $2.4 trillion to the national deficit. Axios said CBO also calculated that the tariff policies will increase inflation, but that isn't happening either.
You know, we got to keep correcting each other. Billion, trillion, million,
Yeah.
trillion,
That's
billion, a B, a T. It's
They
amazing.
used to say under Obama, what comes after billion? Don't tell Obama.
When we get back, I'm going to talk about China agrees on rare earth trade. This is great when we get back.
The Dick Morris Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dick Morris Show
Entertaining and informative.
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
U.S. and China have agreed to a deal on rare earth minerals. Gloria Gaynor has a thought about that.
Last Friday, China signaled that it would approve a new deal allowing the export of its rare earth minerals to the United States, marking a breakthrough following earlier U.S.-China talks in Geneva and London. U.S. manufacturers need rare earths for a wide range of products, from computer screens to lasers, and China produces roughly 60% and processes more than 90% of the global rare earth supply. Beijing's decision to exercise this leverage over Washington in recent months has paid off, as China analyst Scott Kennedy writes. Good for him.
The United States, by the way, is opening this week its first rare earth mineral mine since the last mines were closed earlier in the year. Let me just revisit that. Rare earth minerals are found next to uranium, so they were not regulated because they're not radioactive and there's no harm they can do. But the International Atomic Energy Commission, the IAEA, the bureaucrats there decided it was a good idea to regulate rare earth minerals because they're found adjacent to radioactive uranium.
Why do anything good for America?
Yeah,
Oh,
and these regulations were so onerous and so damaging that they forced the miners of rare earth minerals to close their mines and leave the U.S. And most of the experts left the U.S. and moved to China. And we literally, by excess federal regulation that accomplished nothing, gave China a gift of this incredible monopoly.
Unbelievable.
And this incredible leverage.
Just like Biden gave Iran a gift and Russia with cutting off our oil. Same thing.
Yeah. But
They have to close their minds because they're closed-minded people.
that's right.
You know what I'm saying? It's horrible. In his first term, Trump reported fantasized about securing America's southern border against immigrants with a moat. stocked with snakes and alligators, and electrified wall topped with spikes. A moat, that's great. Today he saw what might be described as the next best thing. Alligator Alcatraz, a quickly built Florida prison for people set to be deported. A tent city in the unforgiving summer sun, surrounded by swamps, infested with mosquitoes, and patrolled by alligators and pythons. Patrolled by the alligators.
Trump said, I looked outside, and it's not a place I'd want to go hiking anytime soon.
Like he's going to go hiking.
Very soon, the facility will house some of the world's most menacing migrants, some of the most vicious people on the planet.
And some of the most vicious alligators and pythons also. Very soon, the visit highlighted one of the contradictions of his immigration politics. Trump and his aides have consistently played up the supposedly dangerous nature of detained and deported foreigners when data showed a majority have no criminal record. I don't know if I believe that.
No, I don't.
If they're illegal, first of all, they're criminals.
Right.
So right off the bat. Are the beasties a feature or a bug? A reporter asked the White House press, Caroline Lev. She's great, by the way. When you have illegal murderers and rapists and heinous criminals in a detention facility surrounded by alligators, yes, I do think that's a deterrent for them to try to escape, she replied. I love her. There's only one road leading in, and the only way out is one-way flight. It's isolated and surrounded by dangerous wildlife and unforgiving terrain. Love it. Does the administration think seizing people at their workplace and parking them in facilities like this will be popular? We are focused, and then she says, we are focused on getting the worst of the worst out of this country. That's it. Sorry, get out. How's it go? Bye-bye. See ya. Bye-bye. Get out.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, goodbye. So the UPenn, right, backs down on the male athlete in women's sports. This is great. The University of Pennsylvania will send personalized letters of apology to its female athletes who felt aggrieved by transgender swimmer Leah Thomas participating in their team. They will also restore Penn records and honors that they would have won if not for Thomas as a part of the resolution agreement reached within the federal government. And good for them.
And trans athletes throughout the country are reconsidering competing at the college level because of the University of Pennsylvania surrender. And it's pretty clear that if they win, they're going to lose. Yeah. That nobody's going to give them an award, nobody's going to give them a trophy, nobody's going to give them a scholarship. And the women who finish second and third and fourth to these men are going to be rewarded instead.
Well, how about they have transgender teams competing against transgender genders?
Yep.
How about that?
Gender benders.
Trans testicles. No, seriously. That's from Dice Clay. He's not right. I should not be quoting Andrew Dice Clay. No, seriously. Why not have, a section for them?
Republicans in Congress have made huge polling gains over the last couple of weeks as Trump has gone from triumph to triumph. A record high approval rating. This is significant. 10% more of the voters, 36% as opposed to 26%, now approve of the job that congressional Republicans are doing in office. The highest level recorded for Republicans since pollsters began asking the question in 2011. The previous Republican high was 33. But now 36% of the public approves of what congressional Republicans are doing. Democratic approval is about 22%. And this marks a huge change. And I think it's very significant with the midterm elections coming up.
And now the gas prices hit a 4-year low due to Trump. This is amazing. They're running on empty. Right, Lux? The gas prices are at a 4-year low record as Americans go into the 4th of July weekend, all thanks to my boss, our president, Trump. It's amazing. And so how do the Democrats, they look at this, what do they say? Oh, he just has a lot of gas.
No,
they always have
what they're
something
saying
to say.
is that, oh, it's terrible. We need gas prices to be higher
So that-
because people need not to drive or switch to electric cars so they don't promote global warming.
Yeah, but, right, okay.
And they cheered when Joe Biden got gas prices raised.
God.
Now, one result of all that is that on July 4th, there was a major poll which tested patriotism in America. And it was a huge poll with a large sample. And found that 92% of Republicans were proud of this country. 53% of independents were proud of America. But only 36% of Democrats felt pride in America.
Oh, I can see that. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Horrible.
but all you need to do is travel to another country.
Yeah.
And understand what there is about this country that is incredible. What I found particularly interesting is that when you break it down by generations, those born before 1965, Gen X, 71 felt pride in being Americans.
That's me.
But among millennials, those born in the 80s and 90s, only 60% are proud of their country. And among those born since 1997, Gen Z, only 40% are proud of their country. So if you're older, 71% proud. If you're young, if you're the next level, 60% proud. If you're the youngest, 40% proud. So those are not good numbers.
No.
It shows the major drops. And I hope that as they get older, their pride increases. But it's better also to say that this country is better and that you need to realize it.
Well, as you said earlier about the left going far left after they're losing their election, I have to think that so many of these, what are they called? Gen Z, whatever you call them? I don't
Gen
know.
Z is the youngest.
Right.
Yeah.
I would imagine that they're going to start to see some horrible things happening with the left. And maybe
And some
they're
good
going to
things happening in the country.
and the good things
I
happening.
mean, what Trump has just done in passing this bill, you're going to see new jobs in the U.S. You're going to see no inflation. You're going to see cuts in federal spending. And you're going to see tremendous changes in this country as a result of this bill, including your own personal taxes going down.
Yeah. I gotta imagine. One thing I just learned, Dick, is I'm a Gen X. Because I'm born in 61, so I'm a Gen X. All right, so anyway, Trump ending 10 Fed regulations for each one new and created. This is great. Trump, and we talked about this a while back, Trump set a goal of ending 10 existing federal rules, regulations, or guidance letters for every new one created. So far, he has kept up pace to achieve just that. The latest effort comes from the Department of Labor, which has just announced the ending of 63 costly, burdensome regulations, most left over from the Obama and Biden years. Headed for the scrap heap are labor regulations mandating wage and overtime pay for income care workers.
In-home care workers.
In-home, right, I said income. In-home care workers, and one promoting union organizations in certain job categories. Programs that promote apprenticeships will no longer have a requirement that can involve the illegal selection of apprentices based on race and sex.
Queen has a comment on that. One of the Supreme Court decisions that happened over the course of this week or two that were major changes and major wins for Trump was by 6-3, the court upheld the right of parents to opt their children out of LGBTQ plus inclusive books and
H1C.
curriculum that conflict with their religious beliefs. The court reaffirmed what we've long known. Parents have the right to guide their child's education. Smokey Robinson said the same thing. So, a decisive victory for parental rights. The High Court made it clear parents cannot be sidelined in their child's education. This effectively transfers control over the schools from the federal government to individual parents. and it means that parents' rights throughout this whole process cannot be abridged or can't be sloughed off. The immediate impact of the decision is that a parent can say, I don't want this book included in the curriculum for my child, or I don't want this information included. I don't want my pre-pubescent child to be taught all of the sexual stuff.
You know, let me jump in, Dick. I saw a guy, maybe just yesterday, at a community meeting or a school meeting, a parent, teacher, whatever it was, and he got up and he started reading from a book that they've giving to their 5th grade or 6th grade children about whatever, horrible sex stuff. And I can't even repeat the stuff that, and this guy read it and they stopped him. Oh, please, that's inappropriate. Inappropriate. This is what you're giving my kids to read.
That's right.
It was really something.
And the court decision is so important because while in its narrow text it only refers to the issue of books and curriculum, it basically affirms the constitutional right of parents to control the education of their children. Absolutely crucial stuff, and stuff that never would have happened if it were not for this court decision. I remember in the Virginia governorship, Terry McAuliffe was the governor of Virginia, and he said parents have no place in deciding educational policy.
Yeah, I remember
that. It'll
that.
be done by the experts, the teachers.
That's how he lost, right?
And the educators, and he lost over that. And but the issue has never been resolved, and now the Supreme Court is resolving it by basically saying experts move aside. This is what parents need to control.
Really. You know, let's talk to Dino in Queens. It's about the beautiful bill, incentives for vets. Hey, Dino. Are you still there? Dino from Queens? Dino from Queens. He's talking. Oh, he was talking about incentive for the vets in the bill.
Let's go to Sean.
Okay, Sean, Pearl River.
Oh, hi, gentlemen. Great show. And you have both sides. Senator Judy Collins up in May. She takes both sides. I know there's Looney Tunes up there. She might have to put on an act, but sometimes it's not. This bill is tremendous. It's going to help out seniors with deductions for their Social Security taxes, overtime pay. It's going to be deductible. So this is awesome what's going on. And I just want to mention something. A lot of people say radicals voting for Bambi, but the radicals, it's also the 65 Immigration Act kicked in. You got 1 million Muslims in New York City. They voting for him. And that's helping him out. He's got 400,000 votes in the primary, but Curtis could still pull this thing off.
I think so.
Yeah, he could. He could.
I think so.
The important thing is not to spend a lot of time talking about it. Yet. Talk about Mamdani.
And
Keep
his
the
negatives.
focus on him.
Right.
And then we'll go to Curtis.
And Sean, by the way, it says you're from Pearl River, but I'm here in Brooklyn. Sean?
Yes, I'm in Pearl River, Rockland County. You guys are fabulous.
Where are you from, though? Brooklyn, though?
No, not originally from Brooklyn. No. I'm originally from the Bronx. The Bronx moves up to Rockland County. You're a boomer there, my man. You're not Gen Xer. You said 61 or 60. Those are boomers. Those are the earliest the latest boomers.
No, I'm born in 61. I thought Dick said.
Yeah,
that would be a Gen. I don't know.
You're
I don't
X.
even care.
You're
I don't know any of that stuff, and I don't want to know it.
You're X.
Yeah, I have a lot of X's.
Now, there's a new CIA report.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you. There's a new CIA report that details the soft coup that framed Donald Trump in the Russia scandal.
Oh, this is great.
This is very important.
This is really great.
The new CIA assessment released this week is nothing short of a bombshell, a long overdue confirmation of what conservative media has been saying for years. The Obama administration, with the eager help of its top intelligence brass, orchestrated an unprecedented operation to cripple Donald Trump's presidency in the first term before it even began. This isn't some fevered speculation or partisan rumor. This is a CIA report. Quote, "This was Obama, Comey, Clapper, and Brennan deciding we are going to screw Trump. They manufactured the collusion narrative, stamped it with the authority of the intelligence community, and then classified the details to keep the public in the dark. It was, in essence, a soft coup, a direct assault on the will of the American people. Now, Eileen and I wrote this book called Rogue Spooks. And we published it back in 2015, I think. And we talked about the fact that this Russia scandal was basically a coup by the intelligence community trying to get rid of Trump at the start. The CIA's own review lays out in damning detail how former CIA Director John Brennan, former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, and former FBI Director James Comey took unusual and direct control over the infamous intelligence community assessment that became a cornerstone of the Russia collusion hoax. Because the outcome was predetermined. Manufacture a narrative that Trump was a Russian asset, no matter how flimsy the evidence. According to the story, John Brennan handpicked a small group of CIA analysts to produce the intelligence assessment on Russian interference, deliberately excluding 13 of the 17 intelligence agencies at the time. He bypassed the National Intelligence Council, insisted on including the discredited Steele dossier, despite objections from its authors and top Russia experts to promote the false narrative that Russia helped Trump in the 2016 election. John Ratcliffe, the former DNI, put it bluntly: the consequences were disastrous. Trump's presidency was hobbled from day one and forced to operate under a cloud of suspicion that was deliberately manufactured by his political opponents. To this day, the lie that Trump commuted with Russia lingers on, poisoning our politics and giving Democrats a convenient excuse for the 2016 defeat. And why? Because Barack Obama ordered his lackeys to come up with a bogus pretext to undermine Trump.
Could you imagine how much better he would have done, how much more things he would have done? We have to take a break. We should talk when we get back. Imagine him being hobbled, like as you said.
That's right.
And if he wasn't, all right, when we get back, we'll
and
talk
this was
more.
a coup. The effort was to remove him from office.
Okay, when we get back.
The Dick Morris Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dick Morris Show.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're never going to win an Oscar, but tell us about it.
The Department of Justice is weighing an investigation into Hollywood's recent requirements forcing movie makers to embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion in their productions if they want to be nominated for the Best Picture at the Academy Awards. The mandates were slowly introduced over the last several years, but for 2024, the Academy declared that a film must meet 2 out of 4 of the following standards to be deemed eligible. Those standards include having at least one of the lead actors or significant supporting actor is from an unrepresentative racial or ethnic group. But wait, it gets crazier. For the general ensemble cast, it states that at least 30% of all actors in secondary and more minor roles are from or at least 2 of the following unrepresented groups. As for the plot of the film, they must have a theme or narrative focused on this is unbelievable, unrepresented groups. This is unbelievable. They're telling them, the artists, how to work. It continues like this all the way down the page for creative leadership and department heads, along with overall crew composition and paid apprenticeships and internships opportunities. Hence, Mel Gibson, Wahlberg, Rosie, Clint, and John Voight. They're all going on this no woke Hollywood thing.
Yeah, so when you watch the Academy Awards and you tune in like tens of millions of Americans do, understand that they're not dealing with the whole universe. They're dealing only with those films that meet these criteria. and they want it has to be diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this yardstick, winner of Academy Awards, nominated for 5 Academy Awards, and so on,
Blah, blah, blah.
is all
a bunch
all
of bull.
predicated now based on DEI, not based on the quality of the films.
And by the way, this is Sunday, right? I just have to shout out to Hayden from Rachi. He's got hayfields in North Salem where they have every Sunday cars and coffee. It's outrageous. And this guy Lou from Croton Park Auto, I met. It was great. Had some beautiful cars. I just have to shout out. Guys got to go there on a Sunday.
Okay. Paramount and CBS have agreed to settle a high-profile lawsuit brought by Donald Trump over alleged election interference by paying a sum that could exceed $30 million. The agreement follows months of legal wrangling related to CBS News' handling of a 24 interview involving Kamala Harris on the program 60 Minutes. They did this totally biased program where they included stuff that Harris never said in that interview from other interviews.
And edited it a certain way.
Edited out the nonsense and the word salad she used.
Yeah.
And then presented this edited transcript as an actual transcript of the interview. Paramount Global and CBS will pay Trump over $30 million to settle this election interference lawsuit.
Beautiful.
Trump gets $16 million up front for legal fees, case costs, and his choice of presidential library or charity, according to terms disclosed Monday. Trump will receive $16 million up front. The settlement will cover legal fees and other case-related costs, with the remainder earmarked for charitable causes or for a future presidential library at Trump's discretion. Fox News Digital reported that an additional mid-8-figure allocation, mid-8-figure, I think that means over $10 million, is anticipated for CBS to air advertisements, public service announcements, or similar content supportive of conservative causes. CBS has also agreed to implement a new editorial policy known internally as the Trump Rule. The rule mandates the prompt release of full, unedited transcripts of all interviews with future presidential candidates. The policy and update comes in direct response to the allegations central to the Trump lawsuit. With this record settlement, President Donald Trump delivers another win for the American people as he once again holds the fake news media accountable for wrongdoing and deceit. CBS and Paramount Global realized the strength of this historic case and had no choice but to settle. President Trump will always ensure that no one gets away with lying to the American people as he continues on his singular mission to make America great again. This is huge. So Trump is using lawsuits to accomplish what federal election law never was able to do, which is to discipline the news networks so that they provide fair and honest coverage. And by seeking out, in particular, the program 60 Minutes, the highest-rated news show on television, and going after the editing of an interview with Kamala Harris in the middle of the campaign, he has absolutely sent this huge bolt of lightning for free speech and for election fairness. So just look at this week for Donald Trump. He passed his balanced budget bill. He bombed Iran and got rid of their nuclear facilities. He got an agreement by the Supreme Court that you couldn't have local injunctions that was applied nationally, that was holding up his entire program of deportations and cuts. And he got CBS to agree to pay $30 million for artificially editing an interview with his opponents in the 2024 election.
He's finally leveling the scales just a little bit at this point.
What a week this has been.
It's unbelievable. He's just leveling the playing field. Finally. It's been so to one side. And now this guy is starting to get it closer to where it belongs.
When we come back, we'll talk about Elon Musk threatening to have a third party.
The Dick Morris Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dick Morris Show.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Elon Musk is threatening to launch a third party. And
I thought he backed off of that already.
No, he hasn't. He's back on it. And he announced on Twitter or X that he's setting it up, calling it the American Party.
Oh, God.
Now, that made sense before Trump got his balanced budget bill enacted. When there was limitless federal spending, when there was no effort to reduce the national debt, when there was no effort to to have a balanced budget, Musk's complaints made sense. But apparently hasn't read the newspaper in the last couple of months, because now it doesn't make sense. And eventually it's going to collapse, because a third party only works when the other two parties together have failed. If one party's failed, like the Democrats, it'll help the Republicans. But if they both fail, it incentivizes a third party. And I think that this is not the case now. Trump has saved us from that.
Yeah, but if he does this, that's going to water down Trump, our party.
It's not going to happen. He's not going to get the support. He's not going to have the polling numbers, and he's going to back off it.
Wow.
Let's go to Neil in Brooklyn.
Hey, Neil. How you doing?
Thank you. Dick, you're the only guy that could answer this question, okay? George Bush, the senior, in his last State of the Union address said he thanked all of the previous administrations, Democrat and Republican, for the defeat of the Soviet Union. About a year later, Bill Clinton did a speech and said that, and accused George Bush of not thanking anybody and taking all the credit for himself. Now, how did he know he would get away with that lie?
Yeah, well, he got away with so many.
Yeah, he doesn't care.
Add it to the collection. Take a number and wait online.
Oh, my God.
Bill Clinton was a lot of things, but he was not a great devotee of the truth. I remember when he and I were talking before he ran for president about marijuana, and he said, I can't admit that I smoked. So he said, why don't I say that I never disobeyed the laws of this country? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, smoking pot was illegal in the U.S. but legal in Britain, and I only was in Britain. And I said, nobody's going to believe that. Come on. And then eventually he settled on, I didn't inhale.
So stupid.
Which was so stupid.
That was so stupid.
I mean, Bill Clinton regarded the truth as something that you bend and you cut to make fit his political narrative.
He's one of those guys. He's one of those guys that if you say it enough, you start to believe yourself in the lie that you're giving.
But
you know what I used to? You know what I used to do all the time, way before you had all of these people looking at gestures and movements of people. I used to, and this is when I think it was CNN or C-SPAN, they would repeat the news cycle a lot, every hour. So I would watch him and listen to him, and I said, this guy's a lying son of a gun, right? The next time he came on, an hour later, I would shut the sound off and watch him, and I would look at his body movements and whatnot and say, he's lying right there, he's lying. Then I'd watch it again when he was talking, and you could tell where he was lying.
Yeah, you can't understand Bill Clinton unless you've been in my shoes. Sitting there on the couch, watching Hillary to the right of me, Bill to the left of me, saying, everything Ken Starr is prosecuting is wrong. We didn't do the stuff he said.
Right.
He's making this all up. And they were just lying.
Right-wing
Absolute
conspiracy.
lying.
Uh-huh.
And I couldn't believe it. But I couldn't believe that they were lying, but that explicitly Hillary once said to me, once all the truth comes out, you'll be shocked at what these people have done to us, Dick. and they really believed themselves. I think that Bill Clinton chiefly lied to himself. And I think he chiefly persuaded himself that what he thought was the truth, even though it wasn't.
We got Robert in Riverhead. Robert? Hello,
Hi,
Robert.
Good afternoon, guys.
Hey, guy.
America needs to be decommunized. Probably over 10 million of the illegal aliens who came in this country were from communist or radical socialist countries. They have to be removed, or they're going to continue to be a problem.
Yeah, well, they are being removed.
The boss is working on it.
They are being removed, but your stat's a little wrong. Probably about 2 million illegals came from Venezuela. Probably about 500,000 came from Cuba, and about 500,000 from Nicaragua. Of course, you can consider Mexico to be a communist country because they basically elected communists, so it's possible to say that. But your point is basically right, that we have to get these folks out of the country, and Trump is working on it. And the Supreme Court now has cleared the way for massive deportations. But let's also bear in mind something else. All of these Mexicans and all of these Latins, when they came to America legally, have now moved to the right and become Republicans.
Right.
And they approve of the border wall. They approve of efforts to crack down on illegal immigration. And they've become loyal, strong, patriotic American citizens. And we wouldn't be winning the elections we're winning if it wasn't for that. That's the big flaw in the Democrat strategy.
Yep.
They thought you bring them in, you let them here illegally, and you win elections forever because of that.
And it keeps backfiring, right? And so many of their things that they're doing is backfiring. I tell you, the communists, we got to get out, or we have to vote out all the Democrats.
Yeah.
Get those communists out of the country.
So, Joseph in Connecticut, what's up?
Hello, Joseph.
Hey, Pat. What's on your mind? Hey, Pat.
Yeah, thank you, Dick, for taking the call. I'm concerned, as I would think most people are, about assimilation. And Rush Limbaugh was very concerned about it and about the immigrants coming to a country, not assimilating.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be a loss of America, their traditions, and our traditions and culture.
Yeah, but
and
Pat,
his answer
yeah, go ahead.
was to limit the amount of time they could be assimilate into a country, and don't let them vote for 25 years. However, that timeline can be adjusted. But it's a good idea because
But
they
Pat,
don't know our history.
we have lost
And
the election of 2024 if we did that. Trump was elected because of the Latino vote.
Right.
The white vote was the same as it was in 2020 and 2016. The big change in 2024 was we gained 16 points among Latinos.
At least.
We gained 8 points among blacks, and we gained 10 points among Asians. Thank God for these people, and thank God there was not a time limit. See, when Rush Limbaugh spoke, this was before we had the current experience.
Right.
But the current experience suggests that when they come to this country, they understand what's going on. They understand that you have to work for a living. They understand better than we do that the forces that made their own country communists who ruined their country are now at work in America.
And they see it happening with the
and
Democrats.
and they stop it. Thank God those immigrants are here.
Yeah, Teddy Roosevelt had, I got to look it up for next week's show. He talked about when immigrants come here, speak English and do all the things.
It changes us more than it changes them.
What do you mean when the immigrants come in?
Yeah, we become more. We understand why we need to be patriotic. We understand what America means, and we're easily able to see the difference between what's going on in Latin America and what's going on in the U.S.
And then they see the Democrats almost want to make this country like the country they left. You know, with the tyrants and the communism and whatever's going on.
It's the big change of 2024 was not that Donald Trump became more likable or that the people saw the Biden administration. The big change is that the Latino vote, the black vote, and the Asian vote changed.
Yeah.
Minorities became majorities.
Bit the Democrats in the butt. So, Dick Morris, it's been an honor to be here with you.
It's been a fun show.
A really good show.
It's been a great show.
Thank you very little. I mean, thank you very much.
Much.
Thank you very large.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
No. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
No. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Dick Morris Show. You can hear The Dick Morris Show Sundays at noon. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
77 WABC invites you to a family fun day and softball showdown on July 20th with net proceeds benefiting Shriners Children's. John Sterling will call the game as the FDNY takes on the NYPD with special guests Dwight Gooden, Art Shamsky, 77 WABC hosts including Sid Rosenberg, Anthony Cumia, Lionel, Dominic Carter, and many more. For more info and to buy tickets, go to ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org. That's ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org.